the camera just starts, huh? That's good. Very cool.
Yeah, I think where was that?
You just got coffee before I sold the meat. Bassam, are you on?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi Bassam.
You're in the Smith Tower, I see.
I am.
We need to get some new people in on this call.
I was hoping Alexander would join today.
I was hoping Alexander would join. He seems quite active.
Yeah, definitely. I just saw him like on responding to stuff on GitHub.
So what time is it now? In Berlin?
Yeah, or somewhere.
I think he's muted.
I think he's flying to Austin. Take us up on our offer. So
It's about dinner time, I guess.
It's 6
p.m. This is the Rook.
6 p.m.
Okay.
Still talking.
So are we sufficiently past 9 to start?
Can you guys see my screen, the Rook page?
Yeah.
Yes.
A little small,
A little
but
bigger would be nice.
How about this?
somehow you will see the vertical screen.
Can you make the window wider?
Yeah,
There you go.
Is this better?
yeah. Well, it doesn't look like a mobile phone somehow. Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Okay. All right, maybe we can start with where we are with 0.6. I have a list of things on that I'm tracking, but I'm curious to hear where we are. So is Steve in the room?
He is not.
He just got here. He should be
Okay.
here in a second, I think. We're gonna get his cereal first.
Okay, so can we start with build issues? Looks like builds are still failing, so the parallel stuff is not, has it helped or not?
No.
Okay. So we need to look into this. I'll take an action item to go figure out how to, this is the can find import issue?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, even with J4, it hasn't made a difference, it looks like.
Yeah, I was suspecting that's the case. Okay, so I'll take that. And we're seeing it frequently, right? So it's not like it's 1 every 10 anymore. It's 1 every 5, right?
It seems to depend on when the builds are cold or warm, or like I ran 17 builds in a row successfully, then I merged the J4, and then the first one in master failed.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I still have a feeling that it's glide, but okay. Because it is a shared directory for glide. That's why I'm suspicious of it. Okay. So that's that one. Can we talk about removing the API? Because it sounds like we went down a path partially and not all the way. So first, standalone is gone, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's completely gone.
Totally.
Okay.
All the code. There might be a few tidbits, but it's I was getting sure what I'm sitting there.
Okay. So what are the remaining uses of the API?
Well, so the API really provides right now a way to get information and aggregate information, provide synchronous ways of doing things to the CRDs that right now makes Castle's life better.
Okay.
Castle needs it.
And you also putting users as well for object store, right?
Right, and there's no CRD yet for the object store users.
So what's like a concrete example?
So we need to get status of all the. Well, I don't know. The status is a good example.
There's a metrics endpoint, right?
There's a metrics endpoint for Prometheus reporting. There's Castle has a dependency on it, so there's a way we can change things so that to remove that.
Right now, I think Castle does everything through the API and doesn't use the CRDs, right? And so there's a transition period we need to go through to.
Okay. Is that really true? It doesn't use the CRDs at all?
It does not use the CRDs at all.
Michael's nodding, so.
There's common code path underneath, but it actually doesn't use the CRDs directly.
And so during the next iteration, we'll probably start using the CRDs some, but there'll still be some activity on Rook Cuddle and the API.
Okay. So we were having this discussion on the issue that there is still a need for it beyond legacy, and that's what I'm trying to understand.
I think what we decided last meeting was that we can deprecate it, not now, but maybe in the subsequent future releases. But I think we came to agreement and saying that
Yeah, I guess the part I'm curious about is what is. I understand that we have it, we're using it. I guess what I'm trying to understand is there where are the gaps? If we were to remove it and assume it doesn't break anything, where are the gaps?
I think they're around.
Is it just monitoring state? Okay, because the SIG API team is starting this whole effort around declarative management and trying to improve CRDs, and understanding these gaps will help us kind of take that feedback back to them. So that's why I'm interested in trying to figure out where the gaps are.
Yeah, well, and I feel like we depend on a lot of the Ceph tools and shelling out to them basically. So, and then the API essentially exposes what we need from the tools.
Well,
the REST API to do something.
Yeah, but the history of the Rook project is that we actually started out to try to do an abstraction on top of Ceph, and now we're down a path of just orchestrating Ceph, right?
Right.
So there really is no need for two APIs. There is a REST API for Ceph. There are Ceph tools. If you're going to drop below the CRD abstraction, then you're in Ceph land.
So if the Ceph REST API has all status we need, then great, that's what we should be using or adding.
That's right. And if these need to bubble up to CRDs, or we have to improve CRDs to have monitoring, or not monitoring, but better status or progress, then maybe that's something we should take back to SIG API.
So there's something I don't understand here still. Is that, for things that don't really have, where it doesn't make sense to, there's no declarative management for them, like just metrics in general, any sorts of stats and stuff, you're not going to have, custom resource definition objects to, manage all of those. That just you want to pull out of the system, like Prometheus does. So if you get rid of a REST API, how do you expose things like that?
Why wouldn't you just use Prometheus?
What do you mean use Prometheus?
Like use the exporters to get all detailed perf counters and metrics and analytics.
So deploy other components besides Rook then?
No, I mean use the exporters that are available in Rook. Your Prometheus exporter could be used to retrieve that kind of information.
I think what you're saying is that with the CRDs, we get an API that basically has a bunch of set operations on it. Yeah. And you're asking where are the corresponding get operations. And Bassam is sort of saying that, well, you get some of that by going around the corner of Prometheus. And right now there isn't an orthogonal get operator to those put operators, to the set operators. And maybe that's what this API group is looking at doing.
I think you're right in that you don't use CRDs to get status or detailed status or perf stuff, but the path for that should be monitoring and logging, and that's where I would go for that kind of stuff. CRDs are truly for declarative management.
So where would you go to find out how much free space there is in the cluster?
Prometheus.
Seems like a funny place to go for just a simple fact.
Like an API technical, as opposed to viewing the metrics.
Yeah, arguably you can get them from Prometheus, but is Prometheus what Kubernetes wants to put forward as the the preferred path for status and gets?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Like, where would I go to Kubernetes today to get, say, the cluster size? Where is that? I'm curious. Is that an API call? Or,
For cluster size, like
yeah, like how many nodes in a cluster?
how many nodes? Well, yeah, there's an API for getting nodes, node information.
Okay. I mean, yeah, this is again, this feels like it's in the bucket of how do we best use CRDs? Like, should there be a status CRD, a Rook status CRD? When we populate it, or is that really a misuse of CRDs?
Well, I think that is the question, and that's what I would ask the API group.
That's right.
We can make something up and put that forward as the proposal, but, you know, I'm
Yeah.
not sure we want to stick our head out like that.
Have we talked before about the concept that we're taking an internal data structure, like a list of pools, and duplicating it at the CRD level and doing syncing of the state between? I mean, we talked about that.
Yeah, I mean that you mean like the pool template thing that Travis was playing with?
Well, I'm not sure I understood. So, I mean, when you want a pool, you ask it to create the pool, and then we go create it. And under the covers, they don't know that there's a separate thing. You have to manage that. So
Yeah, I guess that's all I'm saying is that CRD isn't the definitive state of pools and Ceph. It's just this thing in the front that we either have to two-way sync or there could be pools in Ceph that the CRDs don't know about, right? Like we're
It's a
maintaining
desired
double
state.
state here in that way.
well, if you create something behind the scenes with Ceph tools, then the CRDs won't be tracking them. Maybe
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm saying that,
track reflect Rook storage, right?
but they can
Not
get out of
Ceph
sync
storage.
because it's definitive state. It's just this. It's just a duplicate state that's not necessarily in sync, and that gets even worse when you deal with things like RGW users, and the more state we try and re-export outside of Ceph as a mirror of it, the more work we're going to be doing syncing that back and forth. So
But
I mean, this is probably really late to talk about that kind of thing, but that continues to worry me.
Yeah, and like a really solid ground right now for me is that there are CRDs for declarative management, declarative state. And if you need to get real-time Ceph information or Ceph state, then use the Ceph API or Ceph tools. That seems like a very dry ground right now.
One thing I want to add is that when on my experience with Kubernetes, we always had, when I was in HP, we always have Hipster doing metrics and monitoring because Hipster is kind of like the Kubernetes way to do that.
Is Hipster extensible at all?
One was so, but
Like, can you tell it to look at arbitrary things?
yeah, you can filter things. It has a Grafana output. It has an API that you can create like a /metric/memory size or whatever. So it does. I'm not sure what kind of metric one that it's exposed with Ceph, and I'm not sure if it how it fits it with Hipsters. But Hipsters, the app to use in Kubernetes. It's actually a Kubernetes.
Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, can we arrive at a place where we're using the CRDs and the Ceph API and Ceph tools initially, and nothing else? I mean, maybe Prometheus too, but if we can get to a place where we're doing that, then we can remove the API, move to Rook CTL, and then from that point onwards, we can figure out whether we need to add more CRDs or improve the monitoring or whatever else.
I think I agree with that, and I think the request would be just for some period to transition.
For sure. Yeah. No. There's no. I'm just trying to figure out what the path forward is. So we are not adding more APIs in the Rook API right now. Is that correct? We're not improving the Rook.
We're not, but we've been maintaining it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so it sounds like going forward, legacy aside or existing support aside, that we would head down a path of normalizing on CRDs and the Ceph tools and API.
Right.
Okay, cool.
I think it's probably gonna be wise to capture that.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this a few times, and there's always
Yeah, I'll open an issue with that.
Well, I think we already have an issue open, and we can just add a comment to it. I can handle that if you want me to.
Sure, sounds good.
I'll do that.
So the flex volume, let's talk about the flex volume.
Wait, Travis had a question.
Should we not worry about making it optional now if we're just saying it's going to go away?
Should we not worry with what?
Their value in making the API service optional in the meantime until it does go away.
I don't think so. I
Just leave
think
it
we should just mark it as legacy or deprecated or something like that.
Yeah.
Such a time.
Yeah, we should definitely add documentation. In our docs, it should say Rook CTL and the Rook API is deprecated.
Sure.
So that nobody builds on it or uses it.
Could you open an issue for that? I don't know.
Sounds like Jared's going to handle it.
And Jared's gonna update it.
Yeah.
Write this down.
Sounds good. So the Rook, the flex volume. If I looked at the issues correctly, it sounds like there's still the issue of where to drop the flex volume and support for things like Rancher, CoreOS, and Atomic. That's still one issue. Let me just try to summarize, and then you can tell me if I'm missing anything.
Okay.
Formatting and mounting from the pod and the issue of Mound propagation.
Yes.
And then the inconsistencies or potential leak of the volume attach CRD. That still seems to be open.
Which one is that one?
Leaving a trailing volume attachment CRDs.
Okay. That's a special use case.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's the volume plug. I guess that's in the first category, the whole volume plugin dir issue. So if I step back a little bit, our goal was how can we get Rook to run on any Kubernetes deployment without having to touch the host, period.
Yeah.
Right? With 1.8, doesn't sound like we're there yet.
Mm-hmm.
With Kubernetes 1.8, it doesn't sound like we're there yet.
Because of the certain distributions that have the read-only flex volume dir, or
Right, yeah, the ecosystem support in general, flex volumes is disappointing.
Yeah. So, and it's not just the read-only path. There's actually our agent has to figure out where to drop the flex volume driver in a place that it can be picked up. And then the Mound propagation issue, the shared Mound propagation is another one that gets in the way as well. But that seems like is that solved in 1.8, Steve?
No, I think it's being discussed. It's not solved 1.8 for sure.
Because there was a merge to varlib kubelet is now.
Yeah, that was part of a fix of a bigger fix. So the bigger fix is actually to allow Mound propagation where you can specify I want this pod to be able to mount things and be able to stream by other hosts and pod. That's not there yet.
Okay, so I guess what I want to ask is how do we get to a point where Rook runs on any Kubernetes deployment wherever without any changes?
It's the mount propagation issue. That's only preventing us from moving the code that does mounting from the flex volume driver to the Rook agent pod, right?
Correct. Because
that doesn't have anything to do necessarily with the ability to deploy Rook in any environment.
yeah, we
Okay.
But if we want Jared, that's important because if we are going to dynamically make the decision of how to mount and what to use and how to format, even on a per deployment basis or per pod basis, we'd have to move that logic, or else we're going to keep maintaining the driver. We have to drop, like every time we change a strategy, we have to go upgrade drivers. Flexible.
Right. Yeah, I definitely don't disagree with it's valuable and advises something. I just want to make sure what the issue is right now. So that makes sense.
So roughly, if we were going to say they're really, our vision is Rook runs everywhere, Kubernetes runs, and without any changes. And there's probably a second part to that, which is, we don't make an assumption that the entire Kubernetes cluster is homogeneous. Like every node is configured exactly the same way. And right now, I don't believe we're doing both of those. Like, you have to make a lot of assumptions about what's on the host, or paths on the host, or whether a kubelet runs in a container or not. The version of Kubernetes, Mound Propagation, the volume plugin dir, and if it varies across nodes, all of those things are issues.
But I'm hoping that all these issues, you're right, those are issues, but I'm hoping that with CSI, that will be solved.
That has nothing to do with CSI.
Why not? It has nothing to do with CSI, because CSI, we're actually doing Flexibility 2.0 is what CSI is going to replace, right?
Our ability to run Rook in an agent and things like Mound Propagation, all that stuff, or where to drop all this stuff, this doesn't go away. I mean, what I thought CSI is 18, they said 12 to 18 months from when it started. Has that changed?
From the last few meetings that I've seen, I think they're targeting an alpha release on 1.9. But basically this CSI, it is what gonna be replacing the agent and all that work.
But the path forward, as I understood, is that there will always be Flex and CSI. Is that?
No, CSI is gonna replace Flex.
From what I understood in San Francisco is that Flex is not going to be completely removed. That they're not going to be able to get rid of that burden.
Okay. Well, I mean, so let's go back to what we're trying to accomplish. Rook runs everywhere in heterogeneous Kubernetes cluster with no changes. Are we saying now that CSI is the first time we'll get to do that? Or are we saying that that's going to happen with Flex? Because we invested in Flex.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen with Flex. I think most of the
why not? Why can't we go?
Because most of the effort in the community are being focused on getting CSI right and developed.
But why can't we go make the changes necessary, or help go work with 6 storage to make the changes necessary to fix our Flex scenario?
We could do that, right? But I mean, since CSI is coming, and if you look at the spec of CSI, it has all the things the same thing that we have on the agent, which is attach, mount, map, unmount, all those verbs. I mean, yes, we can actually implement CSI ourselves, right? Flex volume, but I'm not sure if that effort is better suited, even is coming.
Well, we just went down a path of Flex. I'm a little confused by this. It sounds like we're saying Flex is no longer sufficient given all these issues.
The improvement that we did on Ceph was only one thing, was not to be able to restart kubelet when you have a new driver. That was like that was very painful. So that's what they agreed to do.
No, I think no, that's not how I understood it. I understood it as we're going to support the Rook agent and we're going to use Flex to essentially it's essentially our architecture for being able to run Rook on any Kubernetes deployment.
Yeah, that's because they didn't want
We could switch to CSI instead of Flex going forward, but this whole architecture stands.
Yeah, but the reason why they wanted to do the flex only because they were kind of reluctant of introducing a new in-tree Rook plugin because that if that happened, that means that they will have to support it in the API because that would become part of the API, and they were reluctant about that, and also they were reluctant about the whole API layering and all that. And so flex volume was an alternative that we threw out until we got to CSI. Because CSI was not in a state that we can use in 1.7, 1.8. We were a couple months ago when we started discussing this. So flex volume was kind of like the intermediate, short-term solution for this. And then we say, okay, we cannot use flex volume because of things like we have to really restart kubelet when you
saying that we'll only be able to get to Rook running everywhere without any changes if and when CSI is ready seems like a pretty weak story right now to me.
I think that's having the mindset, at least for me, from the beginning of building this. The way I built the flex volume plugin was in a way that I can migrate the code easily once CSI was ready. But in my mind, I was to me it was well understood that flex volume was gonna go away.
Well, so it seems like CSI is not here right now. There's going to be a time period until we get CSI, and it's stable as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why, if we can identify a concrete set of targeted fixes that will help us realize our overall goal. I don't see why we would just say no to that right away. Like, if we have a concrete set of things to fix, let's take it to the 6 storage, or let's, I think we can make forward progress.
Yeah.
And not just throw our hands up.
I'm just saying, like, what scope does that be? Because given that, CSI is coming, I think 1.9, that's what I heard. After that's 1.9. Where's the balance, I guess? Like, should we put more effort on the flex volume given that CSI is coming, or?
Well, here's my question is, do we know what we need? What is that concrete set of issues do we need, or improvements that we need from flex volume? Do we know that?
We know the issues, but it feels like those issues that you mentioned, especially like the whole read only there, the flex volume not configure. I think that's more an issue of the deployer or configuration.
No, I disagree. It's if we require any changes on the host, I want to make that our issue.
So strategically, I guess I don't understand why we wouldn't continue to invest in Flex plugin until such a time as we're ready to move to CSI.
I agree with that.
Is there an argument against that?
No, I mean,
CSI is not here. It will be here at some point. It's all good and motherhood and apple pie, and we'll be all over it, right? But in the meantime, we got to keep the lights on. So why wouldn't we invest in Flex?
Right. Okay.
And then this issue about that. Do we know what the concrete issues with CSI is? That response seems a little bit weak. I mean, we might know what some issues are.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't started prototyping anything with CSI, so we don't actually know what any concrete issues are.
I'm strongly of the opinion that we need to get this story fixed on Flex, and when CSI is ready, we can and the community decides that they are no longer going to support Flex, then we should switch over. But I don't see why we don't complete our initial goal on Flex, and given our existing investment in Flex, I don't see why I wouldn't just see that through.
I agree with that, but someone I also had this feeling that identifying some of those issues and trying to fix them is actually going to also have a positive impact on the way CSI goes as well.
I completely agree.
Issues that's going to get folded into CSI also.
Right. And so I'd like to know what these issues are. I think I know some of them. I'm not sure I understand all of them. But even if we said in Kubernetes 1.9 that we've made all the changes, we tried for 1.8, it doesn't look like we're there. I thought we're going to get there with 1.8, and we missed a few things. So now in 1.9, we have an opportunity to get to making the fixes necessary so that Rook could run on any Kubernetes deployment. So What are those issues? Sounds like the handoff of the driver is an issue still. Mound propagation is an issue. Maybe that one's already fixed or about to be fixed. The path, and then supporting kubelet in a container. That was identified as an issue even when we started a discussion with SIG storage. Looks like it's still an issue. Are there others? I mean, another one I would put in this bucket is.
I also would like, also the delete, having the flex volume delete gives you the volume source instead of a mount there. That way, if it does that, then we don't have to do some hacking to get more information.
It sounds like a great thing to go put in 1.9.
Okay, this is, I mean, it's related, but it's not canon. But that issue came up in San Francisco, and what I understood or what I took away from that brief touching upon that topic was that that's actually supported. It's not a hack; it's supported. Like you can count on that path having, in a format with the data that you can pull out.
Okay.
And that shocked. And I hope I understood that correctly, but that shocked the hell out of me. So it might not be a hack. We can follow up on that, but
Okay, it's like a backdoor then. Oh.
Yeah, and for example, supporting some things in downstream API would make, like if the volume plugin dir or even the kubelet base dir was supported in the downward API, that means that you can start up the pod and not have it guess where to drop the flex volume and where to mount things. I really would like us to think about how to make the fixes in Kubernetes such that this scenario just works. Like literally just works and works well every single time.
It's pretty telling that we checked this stuff in and then it felt like, I don't know how many, but several people responded on Slack that, they had this problem and that problem. So they were trying it out and immediately hitting issues. Those were the early adopters.
Yeah.
It'd be a really big problem as we go on.
Yeah, I think we basically took a step backwards with everybody in Atomic, CoreOS, and Rancher. We took a step backwards. So we now have a different ask at the highest level for them to make changes to support Rook. That wasn't the case before. So we basically, I think we're heading in the right direction, but there are corner cases that we need to go fix for this to all work.
So is this one that we need to fix for 0.6? It sounds like it, right? Is that possible?
No.
I mean, we should have a good understanding if it's something that we need to fix now or document.
I don't think we can fix it because this is a Kubernetes or CoreOS Atomic things they have to address. I don't think we can do anything in our source code.
I think you can look at it as a CoreOS issue, or you could look at it as a Kubernetes issue. I like to think of it as how can we make changes in Kubernetes such that it works more ubiquitously across deployments.
I'm talking about 0.6 specifically.
Yeah.
That was Dan's question.
My concern is we started with 1.8 as possibly the solution for our flex and deployments of Rook on everywhere. Now I'm not sure we're even on a path for 1.9 to solve this problem. I'd like to get to a point where we get to Rook running everywhere Kubernetes runs in some version of Kubernetes that's not in the distant future. Is that 1.9? If so, then we need to get on fixing these issues. We need to work with SIG storage. There should be features and pull requests that follow to fix these issues. Right now, there is some issues that are in the Rook repo, and that's the extent of it.
Okay, I'll collect those issues, those 3 issues that you mentioned, especially mainly the one where we need to drop in the Rook agent and make sure it works in container. and I'll talk about it in the next meeting with the SIG storage.
Okay, and as far as dates and deadlines, where are we with the process? We should at a minimum have features open or bugs open in the 1.9 repo, or else it's going to be too late.
I don't believe we currently have anything open.
No, we don't have anything open.
Okay, so we can get up. We should open for all of these things, even the ones that we're not confident can go into 1.9.
That's right.
So it's something I've in limited time I've been paying attention to SIG storage. Something I've seen work best when you have that you want to get into, versions of Kubernetes that are upcoming, is to not just come with a complaint, but to come with a proposal.
That's right. Yeah.
Idea of how to fix some of these. You don't have to write the code yet to and come with a full PR, but having a proposal of this is a way we can do this seems to be very well received in that community.
In other words, here's the issue and here's what I want to do about it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's. I think we should try to do that maybe for the next SIG storage meeting, even for the ones that we know, or know a little about. And that's Thursday, right?
That's Thursday morning, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe Jared and Steve, can you guys get together on this?
Yeah.
Okay. Then the issue of local storage and volume PVs. So Travis, the whole local storage support is in external. It's in the external storage repo, right?
Right now.
The whole feature. So it's not in Kubernetes core.
Right.
So could we not make changes there, even if we were to just include those packets? We already take a dependency on that.
Well, so they're working on. There's a few features for local storage that we need really to get it further along where we can build on. They're planning on having those features in 1.9 time frame. So, are you suggesting we go contribute to those, or maybe I wasn't following what?
Well, maybe I'm. There's something I don't understand. It's not. External storage is an independent repo. I would assume that feature would work for 1.8 and 1.7 as well. It's all the logic is going inside that repo as an external provisioner.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess in that 1.9 time frame that they're going to get those.
Right. So if we were to, just like we have our external provisioner today that we're using for Rook, if we were to use local storage, an updated version of the local storage, would we not be able to fix some of these issues or use them to support our scenarios?
Yeah. And independently of the version of Kubernetes, you're saying?
Or along with, collaborating with.
Would we be able to use 1.9 local storage with Kubernetes 1.7?
Yes.
I think the answer is probably.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do a little more research just to confirm, but that.
So my question is, if there are a couple of things that we can do to enable the use of local storage, remove data host dir data, which is not enabled by default, and that's my biggest concern is that people start using Rook and it loses its state.
Right.
And if we can help drive that forward for in a quicker time frame and have it apply to older versions of Kubernetes, that would be amazing.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing is I also don't see how, if we could just wait for these features to show up in 1.9 and then we assume that they're going to work for us, I feel like they're not.
Yeah, we need to confirm early.
So how do we get involved so that we can get, normalize on our pods, OSDs and others just use persistent volumes for storage? not have to make any assumptions about the host directory or really anything. Just we use a persistent volume, and at the persistent volume, if you wanted local storage, then you just use the kind of persistent volume that says local storage.
Right, so I think we need to continue, like get a prototype working on what's there and push for the things we need to get involved more there.
Yeah, and the cool thing about it is if it's true, if the hypothesis is true, you make a couple of fixes in the external storage repo and they apply to older versions of Kubernetes, then you could actually, in the 0.6 time frame, pick up a new and updated external storage commit hash, and you have the features.
For 0.6?
That's right. I mean, we take our glide YAML takes a dependency on external storage.
Well, sure. I guess if those things that we really need to get in there are going to take a month or two, then we're not talking about a 6 time frame anymore.
What I'm trying to say is that the logic to do local storage does not depend on the version of Kubernetes.
I think the other thing he's saying is that those things that you're hoping will get implemented in 0.9 might actually already be implemented in the 0.9 repo.
Or in the external storage.
In the external storage repo at 0.9, and maybe we could take them today and all of a sudden get functionality all the way back to 0.6.
Okay, I see.
That's exactly right. And if we don't get involved with these changes, I feel like they're not going to be adequate for our scenarios. So
I probably agree with that, by the way.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a bandwidth thing getting those guys. But
so that's another bucket of things that, and we could decide that if it doesn't fit in the 0.6 time frame, we should throw it out. But it still seems like we should somehow get involved early with this feature because we are going to be using that going forward exclusively.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just been a bandwidth and priority question until now.
Yeah.
It feels like the next priority.
Okay. Those were on top of my list. What else do we need to look at? I mean, so for 0.6.
Well, a number of these issues I don't think block 0.6. They were just put in there to track on the project board.
Yeah. So it does. That seems like the biggest issue right now is it really doesn't feel like master is more stable than the 0.5 master right now. To me, on all platforms. Is that? Am I the only one that feels that way?
that's really the kubelet integration on CoreOS, Atomic, and Rancher, right? Or is that something else?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell because the failure, shows that can't mount the persistent volume or can't bind it, and it's usually the root cause is that. But it's a really common thing on Slack right now. People show up and say, "It's not working." And I guess Steve and Jared ask, are you on CoreOS or something? And typically the answer is yes. But I'm judging mostly by Slack and people on Slack saying that they can't get it working.
But if you have the flag set, it will work. I'm personally running it right now with the flag sets, and yeah, overall I'm happy with it.
Are you running it on CoreOS, Alexander?
Yeah.
Okay.
I simply added the flag to the Tectonic installer. So,
did you modify Did you add the volume plugin there?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe it's basically we have to very clearly in the documentation say, hey, if you're running in CoreOS, Rancher, or Atomic, Rook will not work until you change the volume plugin there.
That's one thing I'm personally thinking that discovered Rook, and the first thing, I go through the docs. And if we put like a big red mark there and say, hey, if you're on container Linux, you need to do something extra, I think we should be good off. Because if a user then creates a ticket, we can be like, hey, we have a docs for that. Have you read the docs? Please, here, have the docs and look at it.
It does still seem like a step backwards, because I think in 0.5, things roughly just worked on CoreOS.
It does feel like a step backwards. I mean, in 0.5, we didn't have this. We didn't have a volume plugin at all, and so we didn't run into any of these issues.
Right.
There were a different set of issues, of course, but
That's right. But it does. This one feels like a step backwards from the 0.5 release.
is there anything new, I guess, Steve, or anybody that, even if it's somewhat ugly, that just sort of powers through this issue and makes it go away for people?
No. This is how this is because of how CoreOS is configuring kubelet. So if they're not configuring kubelet to work with flex volume in general.
So let me ask this. I mean, this is wouldn't be my preferred path, but what if we check to see if it's CoreOS, and if it's CoreOS, then we do the right thing. Then we make it work.
It's maybe possible. You could, at least the docs of CoreOS, say something about mounting or overlay FS over the user partition, over the user lib partition, or the directory. And if we could do something like this from the agent container, we could simply mount an overlay over the user lib exec directory and then simply put our binary on it.
And how would the kubelet, Alexander, how would the kubelet find it? It would still need to find the flex driver.
Yeah, but it's the default directory. So you wouldn't have the need to change the directory, set the flag, and we would just create an overlay on the normally read-only user lib exec.
Also, that with the overlay, it makes it not read-only.
Yeah, it's just like, I'll try to search the documentation for this. Give me a second.
Is that overlay, is there any isolation on it, or is that visible to all users of the system, all processes, all that?
I think it's depending on which user you're on the system.
Okay. Well, let's look at that and see if there are ways to fix this. I mean, if we have to document it and move forward, let's do that. But it bothers me a little bit that it's a step backwards for some users, and they were seeing it. I mean, that Slack channel is full of it.
And I think my point was, might be, I like to try to avoid the grody paths, but this might be a time when using one, makes the product much more usable for all the users.
So probably this is crazy, but if it's the way that CoreOS or Container Linux is deploying Kubernetes, is there any way we could push a pull request to Container Linux to make them deploy it differently? So at least newer releases.
Yeah. No, that is also an option. So I think there's already an issue open, but we can I mean, I'm sure it's a one-liner change in some systemd unit for the kubelet in CoreOS.
I think what I heard you saying is that we want to push Kubernetes, the whole community of Kubernetes, to be doing these things better.
I mean, honestly, in general, I feel like the Kubernetes core kind of assumes that the kubelet runs on host in most scenarios, and using user libexec is a great example of why that's of that. So maybe there's a different default, or maybe we can do two defaults, was one of the suggestions I made, so that it looks in /etc as well. Things like that we could make in Kubernetes, very contained, scoped pull request that helps everyone.
Right. So
that would be 1.9.
if we fixed it for all deployments, but if there are big deployments that are doing it in a way that doesn't work, maybe we could spend a little energy to pointedly fix it for big deployments like containers.
That's right. Yeah. Again, our goal is to get to Rook runs everywhere Kubernetes runs with no changes. That's our goal.
Hey Alex, does the mount overlay that you talk about, does that also, because one thing that kubelet that runs the container have to do is they have to bind mount the plugin directory. So I don't think they're bind mounting /user/lib effect.
I don't know right now. But I don't know. I'm not finding the docs right now, but I'm still searching.
Okay, I'll look into that later.
Yeah, maybe we can follow up offline on this issue.
Do we have a specific issue opened up for that already? For the the inability to deploy our Flex driver across all environments?
I don't think so.
That's nothing an issue open on that then.
Yeah, this will be in the bucket of things that around Flex and our agent.
You open that issue?
Do you mean an issue on, for example, CoreOS or for the Flex Volume dir?
More of a general issue around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because Kokang, I hope I got this right.
Yeah.
Already opened an issue at where's the chat? At CoreOS, it's the 2201 about Flex Volume plugin dir is read only.
Yeah, so that's in CoreOS. There probably will be a similar one in Atomic and a similar one in wherever. Yeah, my gut says that Kubernetes 1.9 should look in etc Kubernetes plugins as well as var libexec. That should be an alternative path, just to support scenarios where kubelet runs in container. I don't know why they wouldn't take that pull request. It seems like it's very scoped. It'll help everyone. Certainly help us.
So that helps CoreOS because Core is already bind mounting that etc Kubernetes directory.
Yeah, it's where CNI plugins go. So it's everybody's going to put stuff there.
Every container has Kubernetes kubelet. Okay, mount.
Yeah. So if we make it an alternative path for Flex Volume, I think it helps the whole community.
Okay.
That's why it's that's an example of a change that could go into Kubernetes 1.9 that helps the whole thing.
Okay.
All right. What else? What else do you guys want to bring up?
You go back to the list of issues.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any more issues there. What about 376, Jared? The block storage stale, is that?
It's in progress. Yeah, it's in progress. There's nothing massive to talk about, I think, in this forum.
What about 667? Should Rook restart failed OSDs? Is Pavel there?
Yes, I am. So it's almost done, so you just need to finish tests for it, and it could be merged.
Okay.
One of the ones that I'm not too sure on here is having raw block devices in all of our integration test environments. I still think that's kind of a tricky thing to solve, and I don't know if it's going to fit in this time frame.
Is that related to local storage?
No, it's about devices instead of the directory, right?
Right, and having a test environment that actually has some devices to use as well.
Yeah.
Has anybody looked at that?
I think that started on it, and it's kind of tricky.
Isn't it just
So it's breaking their model where we were telling users like, oh, you just need Kubernetes and all our integration tests will run. This needed extra setup.
It is the storage system, right?
a quick thing. I found the link to it. They use it to, in this case, mount kernel modules on top of the lib modules directory.
Oh, okay.
Overlay. But maybe we can work something out to do something like that.
Okay,
And
I'll take a look at that.
that would show up where? That we would have to put that in.
User libexec Kubernetes.
But it still requires a modification of the kubelet wrapper.
Depends on what permissions the kubelet runs with by default. I think it has a lot of permissions because it can mount stuff. So it should kind of have everything, at least on Chorus. I can only speak for Chorus.
Yeah. Okay.
But this would require you to restart the kubelet, right?
Possibly.
Or no?
No, you don't have to.
Yes, it would,
I don't
because you're making changes to the unit, so you would.
Yeah. I had another question, maybe on a related thing. Can the Rook agent pod somehow restart itself?
Sure.
So could it, for example, add another mount, a binder to the pod spec and restart itself?
Sure. So you're saying updating the pod spec?
To add another mount directory and then restart itself?
I don't know if that part of the spec can be upgradable, because not everything on the pod spec can be upgradable or applicable. So
it's a daemon set too, right? That would affect every pod. So
I was thinking like you can just kill that pod. Like,
no, but if you update the pod template, it's part of a bigger daemon set, right?
Right.
Yeah.
This environment, you're going to be changing something for every machine.
Yeah.
So I think we are limited by you can't update the volumes part in the pod, and also secondly, it's from a daemon set. If the pod would for some reason get deleted, you would lose your changes.
Yeah. So one of the things that we should capture in issues is, imagine if you had a heterogeneous cluster. Let's say, I'm going to throw this out. Half the nodes are running Atomic, half the nodes are running Rancher, and the other half are running Rancher. I don't know. I'm making this up. And they have different volume plug-in DIRs on some nodes than others. How do we handle those cases? Right now, we're assuming a completely homogeneous cluster. Like everything about every node is identical. And that's not...
a type of way to expose the plugin the plugin directory to the running pod.
That's right. We should figure out. I don't think this is like a top priority, but that's another one of those cases that's, Rook runs on every Kubernetes installation without changes. It fits in that bucket. So for 0.6, it sounds like these issues are on Rook Flex. We need some either documentation or we need to make a call on whether we should move forward with tagging 0.6. Local storage, I think, Travis, you should figure out what the path forward is, but it doesn't look to me like that's a 0.6 thing. Is that fair?
Right. The timeline seems longer, for sure.
Yeah. And if so, then we should clearly document the data host path that should be enabled. And unfortunately, it also means that somebody has to, set it up correctly. Right now, it being empty is not a good case. That means Rook is not durable by default right now.
So remind me real quick again, I know there are some deficiencies here, but remind me real quick again why, if we put that to a default of like varlib Rook, who do we break? And are we worse off or better off?
I was going to suggest that. What if we didn't change the default to set it, and then in the cleanup documentation, we have to clearly say, well, make sure you delete that directory of all your hosts, which is... Okay.
So is that the main concern, is cluster teardown and not leaving artifacts behind? if you bring another cluster
Or
back
if they
up.
want a different directory, maybe.
And that's exactly why using persistent volumes helps, because if we're building on top of persistent volumes, there's an explicit action to delete them.
Right.
It's not there. Nothing's left behind. Right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But are we in a worse off state if we just put a default in the cluster YAML?
Probably not, actually. Probably in a better state.
Let's maybe just do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Might be able to help us clean up.
Yeah. Or agent can do that.
Yeah.
Maybe a small thing because of the local storage from my side. It should definitely be able that we can move from the host-dir path right now to the local storage. Just a migration should be possible.
It should be possible?
It should be possible. Or are we saying, yeah, 0.6 is, yeah, it works, but 0.7 is local storage and we break some stuff?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'd like to say that if we can make the changes, ideally, say for 0.6, we are local storage. We're only no more any host path. We don't have any dependency on the host path. And if we need to carry it forward, we can carry that forward. If we don't do that, then we call 0.6 to beta, and then we have to migrate one to the other. That's my concern.
Yeah.
Or both.
Well, I don't know. I mean, depends on how we define beta. If we said beta is we will carry you forward, and we decide to deprecate data host path going forward, I would assume that the assumption is that we move the data forward.
Or simply provide a way that a kind of is in a cluster CRD or somewhere saved in the status of it that says, yeah, I'm a cluster with currently really this version like 0.5.
Right.
And so that we see, oh, we now upgrade to 0.6. We have to do migration X, like normal database migration. We have somewhere a state like, oh, it's 0.5. Now we go to 0.6.1. We need to do these migrations and then run on every node some stuff or enter the containers and moves files around.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to trade off. Is the work to get to using local storage, how much what's the scope of that work versus potentially migration work going forward?
Well, I guess I'm asking, do we have to migrate it, or do we, if we were to...
It depends on how you want to define the beta criteria. If the beta criteria is I deploy 0.6, and if you upgrade me to 0.7, it works. Things just work.
Right. I want it to just work, I guess. And new clusters would use the local storage, but if like 0.7 still worked with the host path.
Yeah, so then you're saying you're carrying the host path indefinitely.
Well, we wouldn't have to allow new clusters to be created with the host path. So, eventually.
Yeah. So again, you could decide to do that. You could say that if you were using host path, you'll continue to use host path indefinitely.
Right.
And maybe if it's possible, if it's really possible, maybe have a script or something that would, I don't know, call a function in the operator that then replaces one OSD. You move the data, call the next one, move it, or something like that. Just that, the backwards compatibility. Because for me, there was 0.6 release is like, let's go. I can finally set up my cluster with Rook and put some production data on it. So a bit more than just with right now. Me redeploying the cluster every X days to get the latest Rook version to test out if there are some bugs or something. So,
And that's why I think it'll be interesting to get a little more detail on if we can make some scope changes to the external storage project to help us in this scenario, and we just move forward on local storage, so that we avoid all this migration stuff.
Yeah.
So I
that would be ideal.
Maybe Travis, you can take a deeper look and give us an opinion just on whether it's feasible or not.
Right.
That might be better because then we don't have to wait for a release of Kubernetes to get that fixed. Because the guys from external provisioner volume project, they're very good at accepting pull requests, and then once it merged, you can just update our glide to.
Yeah, and like I said, you're right. We already take a dependency on it. So, even if we have to add some experimental stuff, it's easy to change. It's outside of the core.
Right.
But doesn't the user still need to change something to get the local storage running on the systems? Or am I?
I would hope not. It's essentially a volume that's managed by Kubernetes itself in this case. Local storage, the path. I mean, well, look. I don't expect it to work right away. I think that's why we also have to invest in making it work.
Okay.
We'll probably find issues.
It's my concern with the local storage is a bit like, it's a provisioner in some kind, and in the end, you also need to set a flag or something to pick up the external storage too, the plugin for that or something. Because I don't think it's integrated in Kubernetes, right?
Well, the operator would manage that basically.
Yeah.
The Rook operator or the external storage operator?
The Rook operator?
The Rook operator. Okay.
So there's a feature gate associated with local storage. Do you set feature gates to the API, Kubernetes API, or is that's not something you have to tell the kubelet or anything, right?
Well, I think since this one's an external, I'm not sure what feature gate you're referring to. Like enabling the feature.
Yeah, to have there's other parts about it that go into the scheduler and things. So I know there is a feature gate for it, and what it affects and how to set it, we probably need to look into also.
Right.
Make sure we're not missing something there. Because the idea of being able to just take an external thing and get all the benefits of it is awesome. But if there is some internal,
Anything else?
then we need to know that soon.
So you mean when you want to enable something on the API server, an experimental API, that you need to also go to the API server and add a flag?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, and the local storage plugin is in Tree. I mean, there's part of it in Tree. But anyway, we need to prototype it.
Yeah, we need to understand.
Okay, so let's look at this and see what our path forward is. Ideally, we wouldn't have to do a lot of migration and take advantage of the alpha state.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, alternatively, we don't call 0.6 alpha, or beta. That's another option.
And depending on how we go with the migratability.
Yeah.
I think there's more of a concern. If we're you can migrate, we will work on that you can migrate it, even if you have to put in some manual work, then I think we can call it beta. But if we are not, if we are
we still have to write all the scripts or have very concrete steps for how people do that. So yeah.
It's a plus on Contra and Pro on both sides.
Right. All right. Anything else anybody wants to bring up?
So can we talk about what we need to do to push to release 0.6? I know a bunch of issues, and some of them to be fixed 0.6, some of it to be documented, some of it that we can fix later. So for example, the flex volume plugin issue that we've been having CoreOS, would it be enough to document for 0.6, hey, if you're using CoreOS, make sure you set the volume plugin there. And at the same time, in parallel, we're gonna be working to get it done to 1.9. Is that enough? Or do you want to wait for 0.9 before?
Well, I think what I took away is that there are a bunch of issues that need to be opened with enough detail in them. Some offline work sounds like looking at an overlay and others to understand where we stand with the flex volume. And then the local storage issue, at least some investigative work to see which path we should take for 0.6. both of those feed into, declaring 0.6 ready or how we move forward. So I don't know if we can make the call right now. It sounds like there's some homework to be done. So can we at least maybe on Slack and then on issues follow up this week, and then we have SIG storage meeting on Thursday. I hope we get there. We can go there with a bunch of asks and potential solutions.
When is the meeting? The meeting?
It's usually, I think, Thursdays at 8 a.m. Pacific.
8 a.m. AM PST, right?
Yeah, I think so.
No, 9
It's at
a.m.
9.
9 a.m.
9, sorry, 9, yep.
Same time today.
Ah, okay.
I'll send you a calendar, Alex.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you, Alex.
See you.
Yeah.